Charles Lindbergh tested his plane by flying from San Diego to New York City with a stopover in what city?
Omaha.
What does the acronym RICE stand for? The 4 recommended treatments for most sports injuries.
Rest, ice, compression. Pass.
Who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009?
Pass.
What does a phlebotomist do?
Draws blood.
Experts believe what household pest was likely Earth's flying creature? Earth's first flying creature.
Ant.
What does the acronym RICE stand for? The 4 recommended treatments for most sports injuries.
Pass.
Who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009?
Obama.
Time. All right, Adam. Hold on. Joe, would you give him the come hither?
Mm-hmm. Done.
Excuse me. Just did that right on the microphone. This noise. Sometimes you need a little toot to get through Dumber Than the Show trivia. Alex, you ready?
Uh-huh.
Your turn on Dumber Than the Show trivia, Hot Wings edition, versus Adam. Adam could win $200. You can win pride. On your mark, get set, go. Charles Lindbergh tested his plane by flying from San Diego to New York City with a stopover in what city?
St. Louis.
What does the acronym RICE stand for? The 4 recommended treatments for most sports injuries.
Pass.
Who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009?
Barack Obama.
What does a phlebotomist do?
They check your... Oh, wait a minute. They check your pulse.
Experts believe what household pest was likely Earth's first flying creature?
Again?
Experts believe what household pest was likely Earth's first flying creature?
A fly.
What does the acronym RICE stand for? The 4 recommended treatments for most sports injuries.
Rest, ice, cracker, eat.
Time.
I don't have
Most
any
sports doctors are idiots.
Oh. Right.
Hey, get the trainer out here.
Yeah, I don't
Where's
know.
my saltines?
I have no
I mean, that might be
idea.
right. I don't know.
I don't have
Yeah,
any
no.
idea.
Adam!
Yes.
I don't know why I'm yelling at you. All right, Adam. You have a chance to win $200 here. Let's score this game. See how we do. Charles Lindbergh tested his plane by flying from San Diego to New York with a stopover in what city? Hotwing said St. Louis. Adam said Omaha. He had the spirit of St. Louis, the name of his plane. St. Louis is the answer. 1-0 Hot Wings.
In your face.
What does the acronym RICE stand for? The 4 recommended treatments for most sports injuries. Hotwing said rest, ice, cracker, eat. Adam said rest, ice, compression, pass. Pass. It is rest, ice,
Whoa.
compression, elevation.
I can't believe I got 2 of them. Honest to God.
Adam got the first
shock.
3 so quickly, Adam. I thought
Wow.
you had it.
Yeah.
But that's tough when you hear the ticking and everything. I'm not blaming you.
Yeah.
1-0 Hot Wings. Who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009? Hot Wings said Barack Obama. Adam in West Michigan said Barack Obama. Both correct. 2-1 Hot Wings. What does a phlebotomist do? Hot Wings said check your pulse. Adam said draw blood. It is draw
It's
blood.
Draw blood. Ah.
2-2. Experts believe what household pest was likely Earth's first flying creature? Hotwing said fly. Kind of makes sense. What should we call that? Fly. Why? That's the first thing to do it.
Yeah.
No one is around. Adam said ant. One of you is correct. That person wins. If no one's correct, we go to time. The answer is cockroach.
Oh.
2-2.
Of course.
Go to the clocks, Joe.
This really was a close game, unlike yesterday.
Yeah, I wasted a lot of time.
The winning time is 59.39, and the losing time is 102.32. And that winning time goes to Hotland!
Oh, my gosh. I don't even feel good about that. I'll take it.
I think it was worth that based on your sports doctoring.
Yeah,
I
think
enjoyed that
so.
answer more than any of your correct ever. Oh, no, I'm gone.
Sorry about that.
Now I'm back.
Technically, the phlebotomist always checks my pulse first.
Yep, that's what they describe their job
Yeah.
as. Yeah, I just check people's pulse all day, and then
I'm certified
you do
in pulse
anything
checking.
else? Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
No.
I take their blood, but no one asked me about that.
Yeah, I got very lucky today. Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. You did. All right. Good win. $300 tomorrow. Adam, thanks for playing. Sorry about that.
Hey, Hot Wings is better.
Well,
Barely.
not really.
You drive a cooler vehicle, though.
That's true, yeah. You
So-
can carry more passengers
Yep.
than I can.